Hi, Mark here with the fourth of my Draken Games YouTube channel videos. And as promised at the end of my previous video, which was about the game Vectis, I would talk through a playtest of the game. If you've not seen video number 3, which describes the background to Vectis and what sorts of units there are and how the game's played, it might make more sense to go and see that first. But if you have seen that, then listen on, because I'll talk through one of the playtests. Towards the end of the playtesting, I started logging the battles quite meticulously so I could recreate them, with the hope that they would be useful for this sort of purpose of talking through to people to give them an example of how a game progresses. And this particular playtest, I think, was probably led to the most entertaining battle, and so makes a fairly good example to talk through with people. Okay. So let's move on to a quick insight as to what the opposing generals, I think, were trying to do. I say I think, because whilst I remember being the British general on this one, I don't remember which of my playtesters was the French general, so apologies to them. This is really the defensive plan of the British is in red, and the attacking plan of the French is in this sort of purpley blue. It's meant to be blue, but it kind of looks purple on my screen. Maybe that's my screen. Anyway, not red. That's the main thing. So I was the British general. In my defence, I've been trying most types of approach to this game, both as French general and British general, from very conservative to very aggressive to focusing on the east to focusing on the west. And so I'd like to think that this one was me focusing on a pretty confused defence, because that's how it ended up being. This defensive line here, which I plan to form and deny East Cows and the East Cows blockhouse to the invaders, that's sensible enough. Having a good sized infantry reserve lurking in Parkhurst Forest, that's sensible enough. I decided to have units that were going to stay and defend Yarmouth Castle and Carisbrooke Castle. I didn't want those castles to fall. If I had a unit in Yarmouth Castle, it could contest Yarmouth as well. Defensible, I think, because they are high value objectives, which would give the French a few victory points. But of course, if you tie units to particular defences, it means they're not available elsewhere. So far, so good. Now, here's where the problem comes, in that I was planning to form a kind of a bent line along the west bank of the Medina, sort of hinged on this bit of woodland here, and then kind of ill-defined plan to hold some of the Western Downs and basically force the French round and to attack from here. Now, what I then hope to achieve in stopping the French doing that, I'm a little bit hazy on, looking back on it. This was a few years ago. I think the plan was that the French would have to disperse and deal with these units here. If they didn't disperse, if they turned their back on the Yarmouth garrison, that could come and attack from the rear perhaps. You had the Parkhurst Forest Reserve that could come out and contest this space here. It would have made more sense if I was going to have this gap in my defences, really to have a cavalry reserve here-ish, and have the cavalry plug that gap. Good cavalry country, it's open ground. That would have been a plan. But instead, as you'll see, my cavalry actually charged ahead and contested the invasion really from turn 1, with the intent being to disrupt and sort of hold back as many of the attackers as possible. Over the course of the battle, it'll become fairly apparent that the French really came up with 3 lines of attack here. One was to take on these defences here, really try and get to East Cows. Another was to have a predominantly infantry attack to try and get across the Medina and attack Newport. And then the third was a predominantly cavalry advance around these defences with the intention of outflanking them and hooking in from behind. So let's see how that went. We'll start off with dispositions ahead of the actual start of the battle. So there you can see them. At various points I'll zoom in, don't worry, I know this is not very distinct because the units are hard to read, but I will zoom in. For the most part, the British have quite prescriptive rules. They're really limited in who they can garrison and position where. So the cavalry, for instance, the artillery is encamped at the centre of the island. There's not much leeway there. Where they have got some leeway is in the garrisons of the castles and the forts and the towns. There's two thoughts. There's two thoughts here. There's a number, as you can see, a couple of towns here are right in the way of the invasion and are probably not going to last very long. Let's be honest. So I think there's two lines of thought there. One line of thought. If I just zoom in a bit on that a little bit. There we go. One line of thought would be you put some really strong units in there, and those really strong units have got a chance of surviving quite a while, taking out some of the invaders and tying down some others. However, they are pretty much sacrificial units. You are throwing away two of your best units when you do that. They will hopefully do that and tie down enough attackers to have made that gambit pay off. But basically, you're saying, okay, if I stick guard infantry there, they may last a few turns, but that guard infantry will be lost at some point. I kind of think maybe your guard infantry needs to be there for the key points of the battle and the open battle that's going to happen over to the west of these areas. So I put in I put in light infantry there, so the weakest regular unit, simply because it was a case of, well, if they take out a unit, great. If not, I've lost light infantry. I've not lost guard infantry. And line infantry, just sort of hedge my bets here and put line infantry at Bembridge with the hope that that would tie down some defenders. But again, if they're lost, at least I've not lost guard infantry. The French do have some leeway in dispositions, not much. The first wave attacks are all light infantry. All the artillery comes ashore. Brading, all the cavalry comes ashore. Let me just show where the cavalry comes ashore. Shanklin, that little village there. But they have got some leeway as to the makeup of the second wave. So there's 10 units in the second wave, 6 line infantry battalions and 4 guard infantry battalions. And that's split between the two invasion points, which are basically, just pick them out with the cursor, Sandown Bay here and Brading Haven here. That split is up to the French general. Now in this case, the French player opted for an even split, so 2 guard infantry units and 3 line infantry units, Sandown Bay, and the same at Brading Haven. Could have had that differently. Could have done that differently. Could have had all 4 guard infantry units at Sandown Bay and have a very, very strong infantry force this part of the island, or you could have done it the reverse and have that at Brading Haven. In this case, the French player went for an even split. Okay, so let's look at how turn 1 progressed. So turn 1, this is the position at the end of each turn, by the way. So at the end of turn 1, as you'd expect, the French have had little chance to do anything except get ashore and to attack their first objective, which is Sandown Fort, held by the light infantry. British, they will act second for the first 3 turns, being quite reactive, of course, because they're the ones trying to respond to an invasion, which they were probably worried about but didn't know was going to happen. So the British will start to deploy. Here you see the cavalry, which was based quite centrally around Castle Castle, starting to deploy all of it deploy to the east of the island. French light infantry is fighting inland, apart from those that have gathered around Sandown Fort, which so far they've failed to take. Not much happens in turn 1. You start to get your units in place. So moving on to turn 2. There we go. Turn 2, as you can see, Sandown Fort has now fallen. It's gone. The French suffered no losses. They've still got their 3 light infantry units intact. The British are really focusing on 2 things, well, 3 things, I guess, but the 2 things that are happening most on the eastern side of the island is they're getting this defensive line formed along the line of Blackbridge Brook and the southern end of Barton Wood. So you can see that defensive line forming quite a strong position to block the attack on East Cowes. The cavalry is charging, most of the cavalry. Some of them have gone north to help with these defences here, but the rest of the cavalry is charging across the downs, and in fact during this turn has destroyed a French light infantry unit. Also this turn, a French light infantry unit has been destroyed trying to attack Bembridge as well. So you can't see it here, but basically one of these units came up here and was destroyed by the Bembridge garrison. So Bembridge garrison, well done lads. You've done some damage at least. And here you see this attack across the east of the island, taken out the most advanced light infantry unit, just starting to get close to Shanklin, where the first wave of French cavalry has just come ashore. So turn 2, first wave of French cavalry and the first wave of French artillery is ashore. Further back you see units basically starting to move into position to get into this Parkhurst Forest Reserve and to start taking defensive positions along the Medina and the Western Downs. Okay, that's turn 2. So looking at turn 3, which marks the end, and end of turn 3 marks the end of day 1. So you can see, and also the end of turn 2, you had the British Marines were able to reinforce these coastal towns here. So the Marines count as light infantry. That's effectively more light infantry units for the British. Here we are now. All the French infantry is ashore. They've been obliged to put quite a bit of effort now into taking Bembridge. They've got artillery across the haven. They're firing across Bembridge to try and bombard it, and they've got light and line infantry taking part in this battle here. So Bembridge is tying down some forces, which is perhaps the best you can expect of Bembridge, really. Elsewhere, the French are sort of being a bit cagey. They're just advancing and using cover, not really a determined attack on Barton Wood yet. Further south, they are counter-attacking against this British cavalry, which is starting to fall back. So you see the British cavalry attack maybe achieved something. Took out one light infantry unit. During this fighting, though, a light cavalry unit of the British was taken out, so maybe that wasn't such a worthwhile charge after all. Maybe it achieved a bit, but it's now starting to withdraw back towards the Medina, whilst the rest of the infantry units slowly get into position. Infantry is quite slow. This artillery unit here is falling back to support the reserve in Parkhurst Forest. So this makes the reserve quite strong, and it helps in the defence of Newtown and this route, which would allow you ultimately to West Cowes. But of course, it's a key unit that's out of action for the rest of the island now. So that artillery is sacked back there, where the French won't get to until quite late in the battle. Maybe it would have been better employed actually shelling the French during their advance. Just a thought. Maybe not. Maybe you need to hold something good back. It's up to you. These little tricolours that you'll see appearing when a French unit has occupied an objective, which is a fortification or settlement. When they move off to show that's still occupied, they put a tricolour there. And to reclaim it, the British unit will have to land on one of those hexes, stay there till the end of the turn, and if they then move off, the tricolour has been removed. It's been de-occupied effectively. So we're seeing these little tricolours appear across the east of the island as the French move across, which you would expect. I think it's really very unlikely that the British will be able to hold on to much in the east of the island. So that is turn 3, end of the first day. So then we move on to turn 4, second day of combat. And now things are starting to develop. So let's have a bit of a zoom in here. Let's zoom in on battle for Blackbridge Brook and Barton Wood. So you've got quite powerful defences here. You've got heavy cavalry, light infantry, Marines, line infantry, militia, all supported by artillery. Really trying to stop the French get across Blackbridge Brook, if all possible, and then to delay them in any attempt to advance past Barton Wood to East Cowes. Further south, you can see here we've got the French cavalry, fastest units on the board, as you'd expect, leading this advance across the southern part of the island, with the aim of outflanking these defences, which really haven't formed particularly well. I really put quite a lot of effort into forming this reserve rather than the front line, which maybe it was the wrong thing to do. What's sparing the blushes of the British here is this cavalry charge, which is a retreat, has now become a screen of cavalry. So you've got something there which is stopping a direct assault on the Medina for now. If we look to far east, we will see that Bembridge, the gallant defenders of Bembridge, have been overwhelmed. And Bembridge has been taken. But as you can see, the artillery is still there. It was still there and firing, so that was taken out of advancing further into the island for a while. And you've tied up a couple of units, which were obliged to scrap it out for Bembridge into the second day. Ideal result for the French is if those two units, Sandown Fort and Bembridge, they fall straight away. It's not happened, so that's bought the British a little bit of time, which, to be quite frank, they need. So we are going to move on now. Oh, you'll see, I think everything's ashore now. So we've got the second wave of cavalry just landed, second wave of artillery have just been put ashore at Brading. So every unit is now on the board. There's no British reinforcements and there's no further French invaders to come. So let's move to turn 5. Have a look at the bigger picture for now before I zoom in. Now you're seeing battle starting to be joined. So you've got battle really being joined at Blackbridge Brook, the upper course of the Medina. If you look at the upper course of the Medina, I'll just move that and zoom a bit further. Okay, so we look at the upper valley of the Medina. The French have managed to get guard infantry across and into that woodland. So the attempts to hold that bit of woodland, which I think the light infantry was holding it, they were pushed back, forced to retreat, and the French are across there. You've also got units coming up in support. So you've got more guard infantry, you've got light infantry. Cavalry to the south has paused just to capture Shorewall. One of the problems is that sometimes, even if you've got a fairly good plan, sometimes you react to something and you shouldn't have. Now, in this case, the heavy cavalry British heavy cavalry has got drawn off to the south to try and engage these units and perhaps try and halt the flanking movement. And that, as you'll see, has left them quite isolated. The rest of the light cavalry is pulled back across the Medina and is in a good position to sort of countercharge anyone that's trying to cross it. They've got artillery support, so you've got some kind of defensive position there. But as you can see, this big gaping gap here, which is just asking to be outflanked. If we look, we're fighting to capture East Cowes. You can see that both sides have lost units. The French have lost a light infantry unit and the British have lost a militia unit. The militia unit being lost as it was here has allowed the French to push across, take that hex, and they've now crossed the Blackbridge Brook probably earlier than the British would have liked. And that, I guess, is the peril of having a militia unit in the front line in open ground. They're quite weak and they've been broken. But still a strong position. A lot of cavalry, infantry, artillery support. So that's going to develop into quite an ongoing battle. Okay, the last turn of day 2. So turn 6, and this will be the last turn for this particular video. There we see it. So French cavalry is now moving across unopposed the southwestern quadrant of the island and is starting to hook up and take its role in really outflanking this British line. The British line kind of down the Medina. Any attempt to hold the Western Downs has kind of got a bit blunted by the fact that the cavalry is now contesting it. So this really is a line anchored here. That's the right flank of the British line, and it's just open to being outflanked, and that's what's happening. There's already cavalry units sort of wrapping around here, 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 and here. The reserve is formed. Some That's there, but you've got to think maybe some of these units would have been better off, perhaps in retrospect, contesting these downs, maybe anchoring the flank here in these woods. Oh well. So you've got British defending the bridge to Newport. The Newport's that hex there. Let's just zoom so it's a little bit more clear. So there's the defences of Newport, guard infantry, light cavalry, artillery support, light infantry here, line infantry holding Carisbrooke Castle, and the French are really sending their infantry to try and contest this part of the Medina, and try and force a crossing of this bridge, or anywhere really, and get across and start attacking Newport, which is a high value target. They really want those victory points for Newport. As you can see, the French can continue to push across, and have now got 2 units across the Medina further south. Artillery is in support there. If we look at the battle for these woods, generally the British line is holding. You've now got French units sort of in combat across here, but you've only got the 1 unit across the brook still. You've got the artillery nicely out of harm's way. Units in front of it is in woodland, so it can offer support. And you've got more and more French units sort of streaming north and east, no, and the west, from the east and the south, to try and crack this defensive nut that's being offered to them to stop them getting to East Cowes. Okay, so that's the state of play at about the halfway point of the battle, turn 6 of 12, and what we'll do in the next video is follow turn 7 through to 12 and see how the battle concluded. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Watch out for the next part of this coming up fairly soon, and bye for now.